Hi, Diane. So, episode 4, the last one in the series. And what are we discussing today?
Hi, Aaron. So it's great. We've got this understanding of the components of AI, but now we want to talk about how are they being used in the real world and what is their impact on ITSM especially?
It's a good question. I think if we start from probably one that everybody understands, which is Copilot. So, it's a good example of where that's taking a relatively complex large language model that may be looking at data both within our organization and that's publicly available. But it's doing it in a way where it's interacting directly with the applications that we're using. So if I'm in PowerPoint or I'm in Word, it's there embedded in the application. So when it's generating text for me or it's producing a presentation or it's improving a presentation that I've written, it's embedded in the application. So it's no longer seen as this add-on, as this thing that we have to go and invoke in order to help us. It's just there. And it's just becoming part of using that application or part of our journey. And if I'm in an IT service management tool, I would expect most modern ITSMs to be using AI at the point of which we create that ticket. So whether that's being created by the end user for a portal or whether it's being created by an agent, I would be expecting AI just to be embedded in the application and to be suggesting solutions, guiding me through the process of logging that call. So it should be there to help us and there to advise us from the very start and just becomes part of the application. It's not seen anymore as a separate function that's happening.
Okay. And what do you think the role of AI co-pilots and assistants are? I mean, are they really making us more productive or are they just fancy autocorrects or autocompletes?
Yeah, I think they are genuinely making a difference now. And I think over the last couple of years, the technology has changed enough to make that more possible. I think most people these days are probably using a co-pilot or equivalent to help them write documents, or even if it just gives you a starting point. So sometimes the hardest thing to do when you're writing, say, a technical document, or you're trying to put together a piece of business analysis, or you're trying to maybe start a plan, it's just starting it. So you can go and get examples via the AI to get you going. And then once you get going, you get into the flow of it, and then you can bring your own particular point of view across to it. But it's allowing you to sort of give you that starting point. And because they're so embedded now in the applications that we use, you're not really having to move out of the applications that you're familiar with. And even if you talk about something more complex, like within code, so for example, if I'm developing, I'm unlikely now to start coding from scratch. I'm going to use something like GitHub Copilot to go and give me the framework of my application. So if I want a user input screen, I'm just going to go and get one. I'm just going to get that generated. And then I'm going to flesh that out to be specific around what I'm trying to do. But yeah, I think they've moved a long way forward from just an autocomplete. The types of tasks that they can fulfill and the quality now is so much higher that it really is making a difference in terms of productivity savings, particularly from getting going, that initial starting point.
Okay. And how do these applications talk to AI? How do they turn human intent into something the model understands?
So two different mechanisms there, really. One is what we call pre-processed prompts. So in the last pod, we talked a lot about prompt engineering and user and system prompts. But when they're embedded in an application, something like a co-pilot sits on top of the large language model. So what it's doing is taking the input and then it's refining that prompt for the end user before it submits it. So it's in essence almost writing the user prompt. From a technical point of view, it's not quite doing that, but the way of explaining it is probably easier to think of it like that. So it's gathering other pieces of information, refining that prompt before it goes into the AI, and therefore is giving a much better response, but also something that is in keeping to the application you are in. So if you're in Excel and you're asking it to create you a pivot table or do some statistical analysis, it knows you are looking for something that is number-based and you're looking for something that's a graph or a chart. Whereas if in Word and you ask the same question, it knows you want a more text-based response, maybe with an image or maybe something more static, but you're asking for a slightly different response. And that's what we call a pre-processed prompt, basically. And that's what Copilot does really, really well. The second reason is it's becoming so embedded within the applications now. And that's allowing it to be much better at doing the right job. And also because we're using models that are specific to the task we're trying to do, it means that the way that it interacts into the application is much more seamless. So these sort of blockers and barriers that sort of feel that it's not quite there, that's sort of gone away over the last 2 years.
Okay, and can you share an example where AI is being used in a way people might not expect?
Yeah, I mean, whether she sat in a recording studio today, okay, to record these, record all of the pods actually. But for example, there's an application called Chorder, and what that allows a musician to do is to press a note, and it converts it into a chord. And it will also correct you. So let's say, for example, you move between two notes, and you may have needed to go through a chord structure to get there. Chorder will just do that for you. And the reason I mention that type of application is, let's say, for example, you are creative and you want to write music, but you just can't quite get there. Or you find it quite hard to learn how to play the instrument. Something like Chorder allows you to still construct a song. It's not taking away the creativity because you're still coming up with the structure, but it's just filling in the gaps for you, and it's allowing you to do that. And it's a great example in the real world where AI is just enabling almost more creativity rather than historically where it's seen as stifling or replacing. It's an example where no, it's just allowing more people more access to something. And I think that's a really good example of where AI is helping. And within the sort of the IT world, if you think about 10 years ago, we were already doing proactive problem management and we were already doing sort of change assessment or change impact management. Whereas now what we're capable of doing is actually writing the change plans, not just doing the assessment. And that's where it's starting to really add additional value. And I think that's where you're sort of going from an early case study into something that's much more relevant now. It's just the ability to help us out. And it should always be based on removing human toil. AI should always be seen as an extra pair of hands. It's not replacing creativity or replacing the advantages that we have as humans to interpret data, but it should be taking away the toil, okay? If I want to play a song on a keyboard and it helps me with the right chords and I just need to press the note, perfect. It's taking away something that's harder to do and just making it easier, but it's still allowing you to add creativity onto the top.
Okay, and AI and ITSM, where are we actually seeing it make a difference right now?
I think there's two core use cases outside some of the things we spoke about. So you've got the obvious things around chat and classification, etc. I think for me, within the AI operations space is where it's really starting to make a difference. The amount of time you would go on a major incident management call, you get 20 people on it, you spend the first 10 minutes just getting logs or arguing between each other whose problem it is before you even start looking at it. That can go away now. By the time that bridge is open, the AI should have gathered all the logs. It should have pinpointed where the error is. So rather than having a conversation between, is it a network issue, is it a database issue, is it an application issue, you should already start to be narrowing down where that issue actually lies. And that takes away so much, or saves so much time, in terms of getting to the root of the problem. And it's making a huge difference in the AI operation space. And also the ability to run synthetic transactions to understand where in the process something is breaking already is such a big difference. And also we can now get user data. Previously, we've always been quite good at running event management on systems. So, CPU load, disk space, network performance. We've always been really good at that. But now with the advent of DEX tooling, where we can measure user experience as well. So when we can see a drop off in user experience, we know there's an underlying issue happening. Now, by feeding that data into AI ops, it means we're not just reliant on understanding the infrastructure. If the end user is seeing a problem immediately, we can respond to that. So if I'm using my banking app and I'm getting a delay, previously we would have relied on the system telling us, but now we can rely on the fact that my key presses are delayed, indicates there's a potential problem. And that's a real big shift in the way that we can operate IT. And I think the second one is around knowledge. Knowledge has always been a bit of a poor child within ITSM because we want to solve the problem. We've got too much workload. I can't go back and write that knowledge article because I'm too busy. And I hate documentation because most IT people do. AI can write that documentation, okay? Or it can give that starter for 10. It takes away that load for me. I can refine it and make sure it's accurate and correct it where I need to, but it can get there for me for that starter for 10. And it's a big time saver. And the better quality knowledge we have means we are more likely to be able to solve that problem before we need that engineer. And equally, with generative AI, if it writes that and it puts the right classification around it, improves our chat experience. So you get a huge benefit from something really simple and by automating a task that we hate.
Okay. All of these are great. So if I'm an ITSM manager, how should I get started with this?
I think the first thing is to make sure you put a layer of governance around it. So I think we spoke on the previous pods around layering different AIs and using the right AI to do the right job. So from a corporate perspective, you almost need a central AI governance. So you're not purchasing tooling you don't need, but equally you're making the right investments in the right areas. And that's going to be a conversation across the organization, not just within ITSM. So by having a central governance is a really good place to start. It should fall under architectural governance. So you're making sure you're doing the right things. That also can allay some of the security fears, or at least make sure you're picking AI that conforms to your corporate security standards. So again, having that central governance is key. Use the rate AI for the right job. Don't take one and try to make it do something it's not really designed to do, because you won't get the right output and therefore you won't make the investment case. It's better to get something to do the right job, just as you would in any other recruitment hire. It's the same thing. If you're going to see AI as an extra pair of hands, well, get the right pair of hands, okay? So it's doing the right thing you are asking it to do. And then I think it's also important to understand how that fits within your corporate structure. So you're giving the right messaging, and the way that it's rolled out is done in a way that conforms to your corporate standards, and people aren't worried about it, but they see it as just an opportunity. And I think that's quite key as well. So good comms, good way of, or good documentation, a good understanding as why you're doing it is equally important. So yeah, all of those things I would consider before I was rolling out any AI itself. Also, from a KTSL perspective, we do offer an assessment for organisations where we can come in and look at where they are, look at what they're doing at the moment, and then produce a plan for either further implementation of AI or help them pick that right AI for the right task, or look at where the best business case is for them to start on that journey. So that's something that we offer, and I think organisations are finding that useful because it means they can make the right business case and not look for AI to do too much, but make sure it gets embedded in the business and it's a really positive experience, because that's then going to allow you to expand its uses.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. That's all been very informative.
Thanks very much, Diane. Hopefully you found something interesting from our series of podcasts, The Natural Language of AI. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them at hello@ktsl.com. Thank you.